Battlefield's Firestorm Battle Royale is a new experience, both to those more familiar with the Battle Royale genre of games, but more importantly, arguably, the meat and potato Battlefield infantry player or vehicle player who may not have extensive experience playing a Battle Royale title. Thus, here's your Firestorm guide from jumping out of the plane to securing that B4 victory. So we start, of course, even before you choose to jump out of an airplane, because when it comes to character selection, there isn't really much in Battlefield's Firestorm to really pay attention to, other how good they're actually going to blend into the surrounding. And because the German faction as it stands right now has more grey, white-based camos and attires, it is generally recommended that you pick one of the German soldiers with such a camo or suit equip than one of the more green, grey, brown soldiers from the Allied faction. That's really just a small tip there, but it could save your bacon from time to time or give you a little bit of a sneaky advantage on your enemies. Then of course we move on to dropping, one of the most important parts of a Battle Royale title. Now, whether you choose to go for lots of player quick kills and probably also a quick death, at the same time having the chance of better loot, is of course a high risk versus low risk scenario. Less players means probably less loot, but also means less contention for that loot. The tip I would give here is not only know what kind of loot areas are actually good, because there's plenty of places that, well, players tend not to know actually have some pretty high tier drops. I'll actually have a map linked down below in the description for you guys to take a look at. You can actually check out what kind of loot has what kind of chance of spawning where on the map. It's actually a relatively useful tool, but my general tip would be wait for most of the players to actually jump out the plane. Seemingly in Battlefield 5's Firestorm, most people are relatively eager to get on the ground, and while that's admirable, we want some active combat going, it's easier to start a game if you don't have to share your loot between 7 other players and risk getting shotgunned in the face within the first 30 seconds. Thus, wait for a later stage to drop out and go for a less risk, less populated drop where you're going to have an easier time getting some basic equipment set up before you move on to engage some players. There's also something to pay attention to whether or not you're going for a early high risk drop or low drop. If you drop straight down, that is to say you angle your character such as low as possible, meaning that you're looking straight at the ground below you, you actually will drop faster. That's simple physics. It makes quite a bit of sense, but I see plenty of players just dropping out and letting gravity do its thing. Help gravity along. Make sure you're trying to get down there as fast as possible. Now, once you have landed, the first thing you should be making sure of is whether or not you're actually alone. Be that if you're traveling with a squad or solos, your strategy is going to rapidly change if you've got players in close contention with you. Because if you're in a nice area full of loot and you've got nobody to be worried about, well, you don't have to pick up an unnecessarily bad gun or a gun that you're not going to like and enjoy. Save your time and wait for the good weapons that you can find around you. Same goes with armor. If you're anticipating combat within the next 20 seconds, you're going to apply whatever armor, whatever gadget you have equipped, no matter whether it would maybe be more strategic to wait with those gadgets and find, for example, a medium armor pack, which avoids the need of wasting even a single armor plate. If you're alone, you can make those choices. Just collect a bunch of loot and worry about what to use and what to apply when, after you've got a good idea of what kind of gear you're starting off with in the game. One of the reasons, personally, I prefer to drop with my squad in a slightly lower contested area and go for a little bit of a slower start, but then towards the medium and end game, really turn up the heat and start hunting down those enemy players with a good set of gear, fully stocked on meds and armor and anything else we could possibly need. From the early stages, then we move into the gearing up stage, stage 2 towards the mid game. And here, weapon choice and gadget choice as well as armor usage are some of these central topics that you need to have a basic understanding of to succeed when it comes to Battlefield 5's Firestorm. Now, important is a number of things when it comes to choosing what weapons you want. Firstly, every player should go for some kind of range flexibility. That means you need to have a weapon that's going to be competent at least, not necessarily dominant, at close quarter combat, and then you need a weapon that's either going to be good at medium range or more long range engagements. Now, most weapons in Battlefield 5 cover at least 2 of those engagement distances, so you can go, for example, with an SMG and long range LMG combo, or an SMG and semi-automatic, or maybe even a shotgun combined with a bolt action rifle, giving you competences at various engagement distances. That's important for every single player, but also for a squad as whole. Because I found the most effective squads I've ran with so far have been those where each and every one of us had different types of weapons, ideal for different situations, because it allowed us to provide a far wider variety of engagement distances and effective fire on enemies in various situations. Thus, when I'm running with a squad, somebody usually runs a bolt-action rifle or a SLR such as the ZH-29. Another player is usually running a bipod LMG. Almost all of us either have close-range equipped assault rifles such as the STG or Sturmgewehr 1.5, or even an SMG such as the Tommy gun or Suomi, so that we can close in our enemies and finish off the kills easily. This allows us a great deal of flexibility. We're never completely outgunned. At least one of us, usually multiple of our players, can engage targets at any given time. But when it comes to that clutch last close quarter couple of kills that you need to win the game, we've all got a shotgun, SMG or assault rifle equipped that we can really finish the job. Also, in terms of weapon choice, what is very important is that you choose a weapon that you are capable of using. Different players have different kind of player styles and strengths. Some people are very good at sniping with iron sights. I, for my part, probably have a better chance killing people with melee weapons than I do with an iron sight bolt-action rifle. A scoped Gewehr 43, on the other hand, or even better an STG, are much more down my alley and weapons that I will succeed in using. Take that into account when you're choosing what weapons to pick up, because it's not always worth going for a higher tier weapon, an epic tier weapon, over, for example, a blue or green tier weapon, if you're not going to feel comfortable with that weapon and going to be able to land the shots that you need to land. In the end, don't forget, the only differences between the different tiers of weapons are the specializations they have equipped, not the actual damage they're able to do. Those specializations are actually another important point to take into account. The way they work as of now is that your basic green tier has no specializations, your mid blue tier has 2 specializations equipped, with the epic pink tier having an additional 2 specializations over those already present on the blue version of that weapon. So you don't actually lose anything upgrading from a blue to an epic if you actually have the same weapon. The scope may change, and that may be an important point for you to pay attention to, because, for example, if you're not a fan of the scoped STG, well, then maybe you shouldn't pick up the epic tier of that, because the blue medium range tier has an RDS red dot sight, which is maybe more ideal to your kind of playstyle or your personal preferences. It's your accuracy in the end that's really going to decide whether you're going to win that firefight, not whether you had a blue or pink weapon. If you want to have a full overview of not only what weapons are available in Battlefield 5 Firestorm, but also what specializations the different tiers come equipped with, I'll link down below in the description a post to the Battlefield 5 fan wiki, which has a full overview over these specializations available. Lastly then, in stage 2, what I wanted to talk about was armor usage, because not only is it important not necessarily to instantly equip armor when you land down below in the first stage of early dropping, as I already explained, and for the reasons I already explained, but the same goes when you're finishing off a firefight. You finished off a squad, they're guaranteed to have some pretty good loot. Now, their armor will be depleted, but if you only have, for example, a tier 1 or tier 2 armor belt, you're going to probably be able to get a tier 2 or tier 3 off your enemy if it's towards the mid or end stage of the game. So there's no point in placing armor plates in your armor that you're about to exchange for a better kit anyway. You may or may not end up wasting 2 or even 3 armor plates as a squad if doing this incorrectly. We move on then, of course, to the mid and late game, combat engagements and objectives. This is where things start to heat up. Maybe only 20 players are left and combat starts to get pretty interesting, because most players at this stage have some pretty good gear. In solo, what I found to be the most important aspect is stealth. Because so many people are camping in this game, being aware of not only where they are, but making sure they don't know where you are and they can't surprise you is vital to surviving. This is why I tend, even in squad games, but more importantly in solo games, to not go for vehicles. Not only are they only strong when you've got 2 or more players, because you cannot move and shoot simultaneously if you're driving a tank alone, but they also always give your position away from about 500 meters at least, and I don't mean only when you're breaking them out because of the loud sirens. Also, when you're driving them, you can hear them coming for ages. It's extremely easy to ambush them, and unless it's a very heavy tank, they're also very easy to take out with the right amount of Panzerfaust, which any decently equipped squad will have plenty of to do so. When it comes to then actually choosing when to engage targets, this is a classic first-person shooter skill, but more important in Battle Royale games than other games, because there's no respawn if you mess things up and they turn around and own you. Now, engaging targets always has to be a squad decision. Everybody has to be ready to fire on the target, the enemy squad. This is assuming, of course, you've not been spotted, and everybody needs to be in a position, an engagement distance, where they can do something against the enemy. At least in most scenarios, this is what you want to go for, which means you want the MMG guy set up with his bipod, the guy running some more close quarter weapons a little bit closer to the enemy so he can run in and finish off some kills, and you want the sniper already lining up his first headshot to break somebody's armor and make things a little bit easier. This seems like obvious advice, but too often do I see squads not moving through the map as a unit, but spreading out quite considerably, especially towards the more mid and late game, where that shouldn't be the case, because you shouldn't be going for loot all the time. You should be focusing on trying to take out players, or if you're more of the passive player, hiding and making sure players don't actually find you. That's another aspect that we actually need to talk about, because moving as a squad and squad communication is just as vital as making sure you have the right weapon setup and gadgets set up for your squad. Which is why I would always recommend that you have some kind of leader in your squad calling where you're going to go next, where you're going to drop, when you're going to engage. A kind of command structure, if you so will, that can change from every game. It can be the same player every game if you prefer, but it generally helps with the organization of the squad and makes for a more successful engagement against enemy targets. Speaking of leadership and structure, one of the most powerful tools you have against an enemy squad or enemy player is chaos. If they're camping in a building not aware of your position, and suddenly there's an artillery strike coming down on that position, or you're blowing the building apart with a couple of Panzerfausts, well, they're going to suddenly have to move. Probably they're going to make a mistake, running out into the open or running away from their relatively covered position, and you're going to be able to get the drop on them. Using these kind of mechanics, forcing the enemy's hands can turn a very good situation for the enemy into a very bad one relatively quickly. And it's one of the reasons why I personally, especially in squad games, but even sometimes in solo games, prefer to avoid more built-up areas toward the mid and end game, because I find too many people camping around there, and I find it too easy to flush them out if I'm on the opposite side. In other words, they're also great cover, because they're all camping in the same house. Isn't that great once I call in an artillery strike on their position, or just start bombing them with all the explosives I have? Speaking of those explosives, that's another small tip I can give you. Always make sure not only you're picking them up, but you're using them as well. Blow up their cover, blow up their tank, use grenades against them as well. As said previously, the more chaos you cause to the enemy, the easier it is going to be for you to go and take them out. In terms of the objectives and when to go for them, be it a vehicle lockup if you're a squad that likes vehicle combat, or things like safes or resupply positions and points. Really, you shouldn't be deviating from what is good map knowledge and good pathing to go to them too much. I found that they can be quite a distraction, and especially those resupply points are death traps if there's players nearby. Me and my squad regularly take advantage of people trying to capture those resupply points, go over there, figure out where they exactly are, take them out, and then go and take their loot. Nevertheless, if they're on your path into the middle of the circle or towards more the center and out of the Firestorm, then absolutely go by and try and capture them. Just be aware that if the enemy knows where your position is, that is an advantage they have over you. Then again, you can also bait an enemy into come and try and getting you if you have superior gear or enough cover to fight them in a fair fight. But that leaves us then with the final few minutes, late game, and a little bit of positioning to talk about there as well. The later the game gets, the more combat becomes positioning based in my personal experience. We've talked about how buildings can be quite dangerous, but also quite a death trap for somebody to camp in. But going with the circle and timing where you're moving to from cover to cover becomes more important, understandably, the smaller the circle gets. While you always want to stay ahead of the circle, you don't necessarily want to be in the middle of the map, surrounded by enemies sometime at mid-game, because, well, you're just going to get shot from all sides and die. Really, you want to be more towards the edges, not the very edge, because then you're just going to get burnt to a crisp, to make sure that you don't constantly get flanked from behind. As things get more chaotic and hectic, making sure you move from cover position to cover position as a squad, making use of a clear leadership structure, having somebody call out not only where the enemies are, but also where you need to be going to make sure they either have or do not have sights on you, or you have sights on them, is extremely important. It's not just about nerves and good shooting, there's quite a bit of strategy and intellectual use of gadgets as well that can make a last round or the last squad that you're fighting against far easier to take out than, well, just a simple free-for-all TDM experience. That should be no surprise, but too often do I see squads just essentially falling apart in the last minutes of a Firestorm experience, going wherever everybody thinks they need to go, instead of more strategically still working together methodically, taking out one person at a time, one person setting up their bipod, providing covering fire, the other person blowing up the cover they have, while the last person in your squad, or the last two people, if you're lucky enough to have 4 in your squad, are flanking the enemy's position and taking them out from behind. But that pretty much wraps it up for Firestorm and the advice I can give you. This has become quite a lengthy video, I'm all too aware of it, because there's plenty to talk about when it comes to doing things right in a Battle Royale title. I'm sure there's things I forgot or even advice that you disagree with, so feel free to leave that as well as of course your usual video suggestions and comments down below in the comments, or hit me up of course with them on Twitter. If you found the video interesting, enjoyable, or at all helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield by video.